Brandon Sanderson is easily my favorite currently working author. The Stormlight Archive and Mistborn are both highly popular and influential series on the fantasy genre, and his greater world of the Cosmere is an ambitious and exciting idea that is currently paying off quite nicely so far. Now, I'm not a huge sci-fi fan when it comes to books, but I was very curious with Skyward and fortunately decided to pick it up and give it a try. So today, I'm going to share my thoughts on the first two entries within this series, Skyward and Starsight. Sanderson is currently trying out a little experiment with this series. Last month, he came out with the series' first novella, Sunreach, and next week we'll be getting the second novella, Redawn. And then on November 23rd, we get book 3, Cytonic, and December 28th, we get the third and final novella, Evershore, with book 4 set to come out next year, I believe. So Sanderson is clearly hard at work, even with J.C. Patterson's help with co-writing these novellas, and I for one think it's working out quite nicely so far. I think this experiment is going to be successful and hopefully get more eyes on this fantastic sci-fi young adult series. Now, I say young adult, but Sanderson YA is very different from other YA series like Percy Jackson. The characters are more mature here, and the story is just tighter and more captivating. The series follows Spensa, who is a new fighter pilot for her homeworld, Detritus, as she tries to reclaim honor for her family name after her father was deemed a coward during the infamous Battle of Alta. However, determined to prove her father was not a coward and that she does not have the same defect, she begins to learn the truth behind that horrible day piece by piece. And at the same time, she begins to question if she does indeed have that defect, and if that defect is even a bad thing after all. So with a Skyward-filled end of the year ahead of us, I wanted to share my thoughts on the first two entries in this series, so let's dive right on in. Starting with the writing for Skyward, it's hard not to like Sanderson. He is very accessible, but still has an obvious and well-refined style. Because this is YA, I'm hesitant to go above an 8 for the prose, as well as the tone, because this is a first-person sci-fi after all. The pacing for both of these books is fantastic, constantly teasing new bits of information and keeping you guessing in terms of plot. And as far as themes go, you can expect themes of legacies and heritage, hope and shame, fear and courage. This is very much an exploratory story with our main character trying to fit the pieces together and discover missing ones as well. However, Spensa and her homeworld of Detritus are constantly being attacked, which makes it hard to progress when you're merely trying to survive. And so, moving on to that story component, I thought the premise was very interesting. It's hard to deliver something unique in the sci-fi genre, but Sanderson is able to do so while still keeping things simple for the first novel in this series. And better yet, I think the plot itself delivers upon those promises from the premise, executing a fantastic story filled with ups and downs for our characters and even the world that they live in. Now, comparing these components to those in Starsight, there are a few differences that I want to highlight. For one, I think the pacing in Starsight is a little bit slower than the first, which is made worse by the fact that it is shorter in length than Skyward. However, I wouldn't say it's anything major. Secondly, based on where Skyward left things, Starsight's premise was a tad more interesting, especially considering that you are more familiar with the world and invested in the characters. But at the end of the day, I would say that the plots themselves are basically tied. And thirdly, as far as the stakes and action go, I think both are great, but Starsight delivers a little bit more fun and action now that all the pieces have been put in place, and Spensa's world is growing. Sanderson doesn't waste time, which allows Starsight to show off a little bit more, even with a smaller word count. Which leads me to the character components. Starting with Skyward, the characters are definitely captivating and interesting here, as they always are. This is certainly one of Sanderson's biggest strengths, especially the relationships that they make and the synergy that he creates. Spensa is a hero that you can easily root for, and you want to see her grow and excel. And Mbot is a well-written AI ship that adds levity and stakes within the series. Watching Spensa go through the rigorous training within the Defiant Defense Force to follow in her father's pilot-shaped footsteps is oftentimes heartbreaking and just as often heartwarming and thrilling. You never know what trouble they might get into in any given chapter, and it adds to that tension present within this book. You don't want to see Spensa get hurt or any of the friends she makes in her flight class, aka Skyward Flight. But all that said, Starsight is even more impressive as it introduces an entirely new cast for Spensa to interact with, and yet it somehow pulls it off while allowing us to learn more about the villain and their perspective. I love villains who are morally gray, and Sanderson makes this one a perfect mix of evil but also ill-informed good, which makes every scene that they're in that much more fascinating and tense. You start to learn more and more of the hold that the superiority has on worlds across the galaxy, and given that Spensa is in the thick of things and partially stranded all by herself, the stakes rise as fast as your hopes to see her get out alive. And lastly, this brings us to the setting. Skyward is entirely on the human planet of Detritus, which is constantly being brigaded by these aliens that they call Krell, inhibiting the humans from being able to progress too much. Skyward focuses on breaking down the structure of the planet and introducing the history of the human race, while Starsight is able to branch out to other worlds and parts of space for spoiler reasons that I won't get into. So, while Starsight obviously has a leg up in this department, at least for the macro side of things, it wouldn't be possible if Skyward didn't do the heavy lifting and give Starsight legs to stand on. Furthermore, Starsight also gives more information with bigger and more frequent reveals in the overall story for the series. However, I do think Skyward's epic moments were a bit more solid, as Starsight requires you to suspend your disbelief a little bit more. And lastly, as far as tech goes, they're more or less the same. The magic system is developed more and more with each book, but Sanderson is clearly saving a large chunk of it for the final two books, Cytonic and Defiant. At the end of the day, these are both fantastic and fairly quick reads. They draw you in and make you fall in love with Spensa, Emba, and the rest of Skyward Flight. Their story is captivating and the stakes are high. For my final ratings, I'm giving Skyward a solid 8 out of 10 and Starsight an 8.5. I think you can do no wrong by picking these up and giving them a read, and I am certainly looking forward to the remaining novellas and main series novels. If you've read either of these books, let me know what you guys think about them down in the comments below, as well as any suggestions that you might have for me. I still have Red Rising, Dune, and To Sleep in a Sea of Stars on my sci-fi TBR, but other than those, I am open to suggestions. Anyways, that's enough from me. If you enjoyed this batch review, you can let me know by hitting that like button and sharing it with a friend. I hope you guys all have a fantastic and spooky Halloween. As always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you all next time.